And we are back. I have another fascinating guest. Let me introduce Kimom Sengupta, World Affairs Editor of The Independent. Sir.
Good afternoon.
And right now, Sir Sengupta has an incredible expertise in foreign affairs, in military affairs. How do you think, what will come next?
I think what will come next is, the appreciation of what's been achieved already. I've got to say that I was in Kyiv when the invasion began, and we were being told by various people that the Russians will be there in 2 or 3 days, that the 40-mile armed convoy coming our way, and that Putin will turn Kyiv into Grozny. That didn't happen, and Kyiv is still standing strong. And in March, I remember coming down to Kharkiv when the city was getting heavily shelled and the Russians were trying to push in. And again, we were told that, this city with a large Russian-speaking population, just 25 miles from the border, it'll be the one place at least the Russians will capture. And they haven't. And then when I came back, another visit, I went with Ukrainian forces as they liberated the villages in the Kharkiv Oblast. So I think the first thing is to appreciate what's been done against expectation, against odds, and take stock, and then take the next move forward with properly equipped forces, with the weaponry that's coming from the West. And Ілько, you pointed out that the tanks are on the way, heavy artillery is on the way, and the next thing Ukraine needs for a combined all-arms operation would be fast jets. So in my view, the F-16s would be the ideal ones, just like the Leopards are the ideal battle tanks for the Ukrainian army, purely because they're so prevalent in NATO. But I think once that comes, then Ukraine can start looking at taking back some of, or even more of the lost territories since the war began. Well, this time last year.
Very interesting, sir. As far as I know, it's forbidden to counter Russia for you. So, what do you think about freedom of speech here in Ukraine?
Well, I do not know.
Can you compare it?
Well, I've been coming here since the Maidan in 2013-14, so I've seen the development of civic society here. I've seen the development of, and very importantly for us, development of a critical free media, and that's essential for any democracy, and hopefully Ukraine in the future will have a critical free media. Well, they'll continue to have a critical free media and hold leaders to account. But that, of course, is all that has gone. We used to own a free paper in Russia called Novaya Gazeta, where journalists were being murdered by the government, and they have been shut down. And so many of Russian independent outlets have been shut down. And I think that's a huge problem, because the Russians are only now getting one side of the story, which is the Putin side. And so they're not being exposed to what's going on elsewhere from the international media. And that is a problem ultimately for Russia, because they're in a claustrophobic bubble where it's an echo chamber where they repeat propaganda, which then people consume. So that's a big problem.
What can you tell us about level of propaganda, level of infusion of propaganda into society, into Russian society, and how it works here in Ukraine?
Well, so many people in Ukraine that I have met over the years have got relations in Russia. And of course, a lot of them say that they can no longer, a lot of people I know, Ukrainian friends, say they can no longer speak to their friends in Russia, because, it's an entirely separate narrative. They do not understand what's going on here. They believe the myth of denazification. On Ukraine, one of the great strengths of Ukraine is the fact it is not Russia, that you have got a critical media, and it's important to have this exchange of information, to have the freedom and the confidence to disagree, if necessary, with your leaders. So I think that's the great asset, and I think that's been one of the factors which has helped the military triumphs which we have seen in the last year.
And from this point of view, what do you think about access what military provide here? So
not enough as for us, international journalists. I think it has become restricted, but that does happen. I have covered about 30-odd wars. I've been to Afghanistan 25 times, Iraq 18 times, and that's with allied military with the US and the UK, and even there, that sometimes the access is restricted for American and British journalists. Look, I fully understand the need for operational secrecy, and I think we do have some journalists, hopefully not many, who behave irresponsibly and give away locations and put the lives of troops in danger. But there's enough of us experienced ones who are not responsible. And, in my view, to tell the story of the Ukrainian military, which is a good story, an honorable story, it would be useful to have objective international journalists in the front line as much as possible.
And I want you to give us some details from your point of view about aerial platforms, a variety of them.
Well, we have been talking about, of course, supplying for a long time, and let's face it, it's one of the ironies of Mr. Putin's invasion that Ukraine has now got the kind of weaponry that it wouldn't have had if it hadn't been invaded. They've been what's the debate now? Of course, the UK can give Eurofighter Typhoons, but I personally don't think they're the right kit, the most suitable kit for Ukraine. There's been a lot of talk about the Swedish Gripen, which is some of it, which the latest versions were built with Russian anti-aircraft systems in mind. But I would have thought, and Ілько and you and others are also obviously far more aware than I am about the French Mirage offer, possible Mirage offer. But I would have thought that the F-16s, because they're so prevalent in NATO forces and can be transferred, would probably be, for the time being, the logical supply. And as we know, the pilots are being trained already. They're being trained by the UK. I think they'll be trained by the US. As President Zelensky said the other day that 3 other NATO countries have shown interest. So so they can be trained up fairly quickly.
Excellent. And from your perspective, again, your expertise is so wide and deep that
Very kind.
It's much more interesting to ask about your experience and comparison based on your experience. What do you think? What is the most urgent necessity right now for us, except military affairs?
Well, it is very impressive the way that infrastructures which had been destroyed has been repaired to an extent, and I think more international help is needed to make sure that because once you get the country moving, with the infrastructure, that's a huge morale boost, as well as, of course, very important for running the country. Now, I have been coming to Ukraine for a long time. I went to Maidan. I was in Crimea when the Russians took over. and then I covered the war in the separatist war in the east. And I've seen the development of Ukrainian society as a modern society, the IT sector, and of course the railways. And when I came down in March from Kyiv, we took the train, it took about 18 hours, and we arrived in the middle of the night during shelling and curfew. And now, of course, you've now got the express trains back again, taking what, 5-6 hours. So, if society is functioning, that's the main thing. To keep society functioning and not to become terrified of war, not to become, I'm not saying the Ukrainians are afraid, but not to be too stymied by what's going on and continue with one's life. And, and of course, then you've got this, very, very big task of rebuilding the country in the future.
Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, we have limited time, and I want to use this small souvenir. This badge. Yeah.
Thank you very much
for your participation. We appreciate you joined us, and I hope to see you later.
We certainly will, but thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your hospitality. Most kind.